Hello, friends, and welcome to your Daily Detroit for Wednesday, February 15th, 2023. I'm J.R. Stays, and joining me virtually is Fletcher Sharpe. How are you, sir?
I'm lucky I didn't get blown away. It's like 27-mile-per-hour winds outside. It's very not. It's like Twister's coming.
I feel like we should just grab squirrel suits.
I don't want to go that far.
Anyway, I know that some listeners are going to wonder why we're not talking about the big story that I didn't know was going to be big, but the story that we end up running in the newsletter about the Starbucks at Mack and Woodward closing over safety concerns. As I have learned more, there is so much more to this story that is very interesting, also goes to some of the issues we need to address. I can say now that, and we're going to talk about this in some future episodes, but I have had so many people reach out to me, and I thank you for that, with more information around this story. Local business owners dealing with some of the same issues, knowing of stories of people who work there. I think it's something where you can't always look at the crime viewer to know the real story of what's happening in a place. I don't know if you have anything to add before we get into the sports, Fletcher, but I just wanted to tell people that we haven't ignored it, but I'm setting it off in a corner for a minute because there's a lot of work to do on it.
Yeah, it's like when you have like a very pale or very like opaque bottle and you open it up to drink it and you're like, it's maybe just a little bit left to sip, and it all comes out and it's like a full 50-ounce bottle and you're like, there's a lot more here than I thought. This story with Starbucks is that. Like, we thought it was very cut and dry, and it's actually just the tip of the iceberg. So when it comes forward, you guys will definitely be shocked at what else is there.
100%. So we've got a lot of sports to talk about. We got a little basketball. We got a little Michigan State, a little Michigan, and Detroit City FC. Let's talk about the Super Bowl, or the Superb Owl, and that there were some local ties, whether you were happy how the game turned out, whether you were mad about it, whether you were just there for the commercials. There were Michigan ties, or state of Michigan ties, throughout that thing. And I wanted to get into it a little bit before we got into some of the other topics.
Yeah, there were 10 players with Michigan ties, whether that be they're from the state of Michigan or they just played in Michigan. 6 of them won a title with the Chiefs. 4 of them, unfortunately, did not with the Eagles. For the Chiefs, we have Frank Clark, played for Michigan. Mike Dana, played for Michigan and Central Michigan. Also is from Detroit and went to the De La Salle High School Purple Pilots, which I'll overlook because, he's a champion. Of course, the most known one, Chad Henne, quarterback at Michigan, retired after the game with a beer in hand, which is very typically Chad Henne. Sky Moore, a slot receiver from Western Michigan. Andrew Wiley, guard from Eastern Michigan and Midland, Michigan. Mike Caliendo, rookie, undrafted from Western Michigan. And then for the Eagles, Brandon Graham, the mainstay in the NFL from Michigan, played for Crockett High School and also from Detroit. Josiah Scott, who played for Michigan State. Tyree Jackson, who went to Mona Shores High School. And then this last one is very personal to me. Avante Maddox, cornerback, went to Pittsburgh from Detroit. He is a player that I coached when he was in Pop Warner. So I was very much sitting there watching him play at the edge of my seat as if I was watching my own child.
It's kind of surreal, isn't it?
Yeah, it's to see someone who like you have known on and off from age like 9 to age 13. And then to see them go from there to, playing in high school. And you're like, I hope they have a pretty good high school career. Then I saw him go to Pitt. And I'm like, he's playing at Pitt. And they got Coach Narduzzi from Michigan State. And he was talking him up. And I'm like, that's really great. Maybe he'll get a chance in the NFL. Hopefully so. To see him get drafted by the Eagles, I'm like, good for him. He found a spot. Hopefully he can just carve out a nice, career. Whether that, means titles, whether that just means playing a while. Hopefully he can play as long as he can without being hurt. But then to see him like actually contributing to a team that almost went to the Super Bowl a few years ago and then went to the Super Bowl this year and actually get to start and play, it was such a surreal moment. And although that they lost, if he hears this, he has nothing to be ashamed about. None of these players do, but especially him, because I know exactly the path that he took to get from Westside Detroit to here. And the fact that he's even still here and just doing things is a testament to his internal fortitude and will. So congrats to all the players who got there, especially the 6 who won, but the 4 who got there are also still champions.
Oh, 100%. Now, when I saw Chet Henne, I kind of laughed, mainly probably because he went over to the AFC, so I kind of lost track of him. Is this terrible that I kind of forgot that he was there? I mean, I know he was a backup quarterback, became a career backup in some ways, You know, he had a few starts. He wasn't completely invisible, but I think because he hopped over to the AFC, like I had forgotten about him.
I mean, it's not really so much he hopped over to the AFC for me. It's the fact he hopped over to like the Dolphins for a little bit and like he had to
Right.
play a bit more. But it was the fact that he hopped over to a team that did not need him to play at all. So like the Chiefs are set. They have Patrick Mahomes. Even Mahomes on like a bad ankle, they'd rather have over Chad Henne. So that lets you know how much they want Mahomes over Henne. So like it's the fact that it's like, all right, well, you're just not going to play. As long as you're okay with that, which I'm sure Chad Henne was, because at that point in your career, the one thing you don't want to do is get hit. Yeah, you're a clipboard guy. When I was a kid, after I realized I wasn't going to grow to be more than 5'10", my career aspiration would be a backup NFL quarterback because I get to go on there, I get to wear jerseys, I get to be important and part of the team, but also I don't get hit. I get to hold the clipboard, I get to make faces in my backwards hat, but I don't get hit. Like I get hit only if it's like, oh, the ball's coming out of bounds, look out. You know, but like you don't actually have to go in there and get hit in the game unless the starter gets hurt. In which case, you better hope that you're good enough to play because you'll get hit a lot.
That leads me to a question. What exactly does the backup quarterback do in these kind of situations? I've always been kind of curious because I've never been part of a football organization.
So essentially, you're kind of like an extra coach. Like obviously, you're not the coach, but if you're a backup on a team, it shows you at least understand the core concepts of the playbook that you're running for the most part. Maybe you don't master it entirely. Maybe the starter's just more of a physical freak than you are and just you have to sit on the bench. But you at least understand the philosophy. So when the player comes off, you know, maybe the coaches are talking and he doesn't want to hear from the coaches, you can go over there and talk to him and be like, hey, here's a read here. Here's what I saw here. You hype up your starter so that, you know, he keeps his confidence going. You're kind of there as like an emotional support person, but also someone who's ready to go if the player cannot get back in and play. And as much as people want to say Chad Henne didn't do much, I will say this. He had a 15-year career. He made $40 million in his career, and he's retiring with as many Super Bowl rings as Peyton Manning.
That is some real truth. Wow, I had not thought about that, but that is some real truth. Does that set him up maybe to be a coach in the future?
Probably. You can leverage your Super Bowl ring into almost anything these days, but 15 years as a quarterback in the league, had some good games, was a college Goliath. I'm sure people probably think he has a decent football mind. I mean, heck, Kellen Moore did it for Boise State, and Kellen Moore was like terrible in the NFL. He has no accolades to be proud of in the NFL except for the fact that he made it. So if he can leverage that into being an offensive coordinator for the Dallas Cowboys at one point, I'm sure Chad Henne could maybe get a head coaching position at some point in the future.
Let's talk Pistons. It is now official. There was a little bit of a holdup with this James Wiseman whole multi-team trade thing. It was finalized on Monday. It turned out that the trade was held up because the Warriors were worried about the health of Gary Payton. And apparently he had failed his physical on Friday. All this has been sorted out. Wiseman will now be able to practice with the Pistons. He could be available for Wednesday's game. What are your thoughts on this one? I got to admit, like, I'm following all the pieces. I'm going, so maybe you can help me.
Number one, not to the Pistons point, but the Trailblazers should be fine and maybe lose a draft pick or two. They had a player out there playing hurt with stomach issues that required him to take Toradol orally to play. Toradol shots are very painful. Toradol orally is, not as painful because it's not a shot, but also it doesn't really do good things to you. So the fact that you're taking those every time just to go play a game, that's not awesome. That's something you should disclose immediately when you're trading said player, especially at the fact that Gary Payton is probably going to miss most of the season, if not the rest of the season with said injury. But to the Pistons point, I don't really understand the trade from getting James Wiseman. I understand why you get rid of Saddiq Bey. It's because he's a young player. It's either between him or Bojan, who's going to be playing, and Bojan is currently balling. He's the Pistons' most effective player offensively. So you kind of can't keep both of them because Saddiq wants to play. And also, you just gave Bojan a fair amount of money in a new contract. So unless you're trading him away entirely with that contract, he's here. But I don't get bringing in James Wiseman. It's essentially bringing in Marvin Bagley like all over again, except younger. And, I mean, James Wiseman has a championship ring he got with the Golden State Warriors, so that's something good to have. He's a championship player. He understands what it means to play in the playoffs. But, like, he's not shown the explosiveness that everyone thought he'd have coming into the NBA. And also, his contract's going to be really expensive down the line if you don't move him. 7 figures expensive if you don't move him. Maybe even 8 figures depending on, how long he stays. So I'm not really sure what the goal is here. I think this is probably Troy's first miss in terms of, trading players and signing players. Even Kevin Knox, they signed, the New York Knicks player who they ended up trading away as well. I thought there was a chance I could have some upside because Kevin Knox showed flashes of figuring it out. Only thing James Wiseman has for him is the fact that he's young, but he's often injured. I'm not sure what this is supposed to do. It's a big gamble. It could turn off great for the Pistons. You get another springy big man who's offensively gifted, who can slot in at the power forward position and allow Jalen Duren to focus mainly on getting rebounds and blocking shots and maybe dunking the ball. Or you trade away a player who's shown to be one of the best for your franchise, young-wise. Saddiq Bey is the first player in Pistons history to hit 100 threes in his first 3 years with the Pistons. Trading away a player like that for a player who has no accolades like that makes me scratch my head, especially when Bojan is kind of older. Saddiq Bey is, I'm not saying he's a spring chicken, but he's still in his rookie contract. I always defer to youth in that situation. Always. So I would have rather seen Bojan go and keep Saddiq Bey and develop him versus getting rid of someone who could be like Chris Middleton was when the Pistons traded him away to Milwaukee and he ended up becoming an all-star, borderline U.S. national team player. I don't think Saddiq Bey's limit is that high, although he was considered for the national team at one point to be on the team that won gold last. He wouldn't have played much, but he at least would have been there. I'm not really sure what this trade's supposed to accomplish, but it's already done.
There it is.
Welcome to Michigan, James Wiseman, and hopefully you contribute as the best you can.
Now, we're coming up on the All-Star break. Are you net positive or net negative on the Pistons the rest of the year?
Net negative. I knew that it was a developing year, and I knew with Cade being hurt for the rest of the season that it would be kind of hard to push through, but they've just been bad. Like, again, I'm all for them losing games because you won't win every single game, especially when your roster is young. But some of these games they're losing are like, even developing, you should not be losing them by 20, 25, 30 points. That makes me have a few questions about how this is going. Because, again, tanking or whatever, or losing what intentionally or whatever is fine. But when you're getting blown out with a young roster, that's going to take a toll on your players. And if you just get blown out continually over and over and over with younger players, they're going to get into the mentality that that's supposed to be okay. And we don't want to do that when you're trying to rebuild, because your rebuild's going to be delayed even further.
It's kind of a scary amount that they're in the basement. The Magic are 18 games back. The Pistons, as of this, are 26 and a half games back. I mean, this is just turning into like the Stratosphere or the Tigers back in the day when they had that like 100-loss season. We've only got like 15 wins under the belt.
They're runaway right now, number 1 draft pick team, which in a way is good because it sets you up to get the player you definitely want. But you'd rather it be kind of close. We're like, oh, we're both trying to win games at the end, but whatever. Instead of it being like, yo, we stink. We are not good, and no one's going to catch us in not being good.
Yeah, they're like a 250 team right now, something like that.
Yeah, and again, I understand why. Jaden Atkins is learning. Jalen Duren is learning. Cade Cunningham is out. Saddiq was not playing great at the time, and that's why he's gone now. Isaiah Stewart is still coming into his own. And the other players who are surrounding them who aren't that great. They're players who've been in the NBA for a while who are complementary players, but in the role that they have, they're not supposed to be that much in the spotlight, and they are, which is unfortunate, but that's just how that works in sports sometimes. But yeah, I would have to say net negative. I was hoping that even if they had a bad record, at least like you'd have some kids in their ball and playing well, and the kids are playing not bad, but not good enough to where I can sit there and say this is a positive going forward.
Let's stay with basketball, but switch to college. We are nearing the end of that regular season when we need to talk a little bit about Michigan State and a little bit about Michigan. Unfortunately, there's a little bit of Michigan State news to talk about that. It's a former player. It's a tragic kind of saga here to see the kind of fall of Keith Damon Appling. He pled guilty on the same day his trial was set to begin on Monday with the death of a 66-year-old Clyde Edmonds. He played from 2010 to 2014. He was going to be like a real bright star. And this is like, he's had multiple run-ins with the law. This guilty plea, he may be serving 18 to 40 years, according to this plea agreement, on the second-degree murder charge and 2 years on the firearm charge. It's one of those things to remember that like doing well in basketball does not guarantee a way out.
Keith Appling stings a bit more than, say, the average player, because I remember watching him in high school. He played against my high school, and watching him and Derek Nix just kind of surgically take our team apart. I was like, you know what? These guys are stars. Keith Appling had like the ability to play in the NBA if he really wanted to, really wanted to. And seeing him go to a team coached by someone like Tom Izzo, I was like, whatever issues he has is going to straighten him out entirely, because Tom Izzo just does that. He makes sure that you understand that he is the coach in charge, and if you don't like that, then you can leave. Just to see the way that he's just kind of been putting the fork in the road, had a chance to turn right and effectively chose to turn left, very hard left. It really bums me out, because this guy was very talented, and just to see him take this route, it's not great. And obviously, you have to understand, I'm speaking more to myself than everyone else, but everyone as well. Like, you might look up to people, you might admire people, but they make the choices they make themselves, and you have to just understand that and move forward.
For sure. For sure. It's definitely a bit of sad news, but if I didn't talk about it, I feel like it would be remiss, especially because everything, tied together in Detroit and all that. It's just a terrible thing. Now, let's talk about the team itself this year. It seems like they're going to make the tourney and maybe do a little bit better than people expected they would this year.
I mean, I don't know. I've never, at any point this year, did I think they would not make the tournament, solely because the teams that they've lost to are like really good teams. Like, they have 9 losses on the year, but their 9 losses are to, at the time, number 3 Gonzaga, at the time, number 1 Alabama, Notre Dame, Northwestern, who's above them in the standings and Big Ten, Illinois, who's above them in standings, number 1 Purdue at the time, number 14 Indiana, number 3 Purdue at the time, Rutgers is above them in like, all the teams they've lost to are better than them. Like, it's not like they lost to Wisconsin or Minnesota or some. They've beaten the teams that they're supposed to beat, and maybe lost to a few teams they're not supposed to beat, but they've also beaten a few teams that are better than them. The thing I like about college basketball more than college football is the computers are way more forgiving. They're like, all right, well, you might have gone 20-15, but if all 15 of your losses came to a team that was in the top 25, we can overlook that because you're playing a tougher schedule. That's why Tom Izzo, before the season, it's something I always admire about him, although if you're a Spartan basketball fan, you hate it because your record looks ugly, potentially. He always schedules as hard as possible out of conference, as hard as possible, because he knows if they beat these teams, it'll help them down the road. And if they lose those games by like a small margin or something, it'll also help them down the road. And it'll mentally prepare those kids to play in the tournament games. It's why he has this long streak of getting in the tournament. Now, there are sometimes he gets in the tournament and he loses to Middle Tennessee State in the first round, which is not awesome. I'm never worried about Michigan State basketball making the tournament because Tom Izzo constructs his schedule to make sure they make the tournament. They might not win the first game. They might maybe win the first game and get blown out the second game or whatever, but they will always qualify for the tournament because to a T, he makes sure that their schedule is hard enough to where they cannot be denied a chance to go play some extra season basketball.
100%, 100%. I wish that could be done in football, but it just can't. And that win against Ohio State, I think, really helped them out. Now let's talk about Michigan, which seems to be on shakier ground.
Yeah, on the flip side, their wins are kind of flimsy. A close win over Eastern Michigan, who is not good. Outside of Amani Bates, even with Amani Bates, that team is not good. A loss to Kentucky, a loss to Arizona State, a loss to Central Michigan, a loss to UNC in a very down year. I'm not sure. I think they'll probably squeak in. I saw on an article that Michigan listed as an 8th seed in the Eastern Division of the final of the 2066 teams that make it. I don't know where Michigan would slot in. I think a lower seed if they get in at all. Otherwise, they're probably an NIT team. They did have one close loss to number 14 Indiana, which should help them, although it is a loss. It should help, buoy them forward because it shows they held in tough against a pretty good team. But I don't know if this team makes the tournament.
Does that call into some questions about Juwan Howard?
Yeah. His first year, he came on like that. And even though he had the situation, with the coach that he open hand slapped, I still thought they were riding the wave. And it's like, all right, when he gets his own kids, it's going to be a little bit different, but probably better. And he's gotten his own kids in his recruiting classes, and his teams seem to not be playing much better. If that, they seem to be playing a little bit worse, especially now that he has his own sons on the roster. So I'm a little confused I do think that fans are growing a little impatient with the progress at Michigan basketball. I think they'll give him another year or so because he is a Michigan legend. But I do know that the fuse is getting a little bit shorter when it comes to patience.
We have a signing to talk about for Detroit City FC, Fletcher.
Ben Morris, formerly of Ipswich Town, comes to Detroit City FC. His career is not really taken off the way he would have liked, mainly due to injury. What's a little bit worrisome for me is he has two ACL injuries, kind of like Devin Amumensa. Unlike Devin Amumensa, ACL injury in the same leg. He's not a big guy. He's about 5'9", like maybe 150-ish, 140-ish. So he relies on quickness. So not having quickness, we're gonna have to hope that he's clinical. I know his last time he was at Gaius, which is in the second division of Sweden. He scored 4 goals there. People seem very high on him. Ipswich is sad to see him go. So that's something that's pretty good. I know a lot of times people leave teams and teams are like, whatever. So for a team to be sad that someone's leaving is good. You're getting someone that they actually think is, a high character person. I'm interested to see how he slots in with his team, though, because, they need forward help and people want to bring in forwards to score goals. This forward has not scored goals as of yet. But I will say one thing. Think I might have said it in the past, and I don't want to sound like, a Euro snob. When people play basketball in other countries, they bring in people for the NBA who have not really panned out because those people play at the highest league. Because basketball was invented in the U.S. So to bring in someone who's English to come to your soccer team is like, you might not have done well here, but you guys invented the sport, so we're going to trust that you might have a bit more knowledge here than some of us might have. So probably going to be leaning on that a bit. Also, again, he's from Ipswich, which is where Trevor James also is from and has done some work as a manager and I think as a player as well.
The Tractor Boys.
There's a connection there. So, yeah, hopefully this works out for them as they need a forward who can inject something in there. The highlights I've seen, he looks pretty mobile, albeit one of them was before the second knee injury. He seems to occupy space well, which is what you want in a forward. But so hopefully we can hope that translates from Ipswich Town over to the USL Championship.
You do what you can. And if you can make something like this work out for you, this could have huge upside. It's more about, can we really rally together and gel together a team that can turn some heads?
Yeah, I mean, Trevor James' system doesn't really rely on a goal scorer to come and score 20 goals a game. You'd like to see this guy get 15, but the way his system works is everyone needs to work together. He'd much rather win a game 1-0, 2-1 than, go out there and score 4 to 5 goals, but, maybe draw 5-5. So really, if he can at least get 7, 8, 9 goals, I think we'll get that a positive return on investment.
We also now know that we will, at least for another year, be seeing Detroit City FC on ESPN Plus. They've inked a new deal. You and I were both kind of skeptical, I think, off air, that there was going to be a deal, and skeptical of claims that there was going to be a multi-year deal, because I think you and I both kind of understand the changing sports media landscape, where ESPN really held all the cards, right? Like, there aren't that many places you're going to be on linear cable and streaming and all those things. And I feel like as this deal, went past December, went past January, and no word, I feel like, A, this is the best case scenario for USL where we're really at, and B, this is a very important year to show that they can draw numbers, especially because MLS is not on that ESPN platform anymore.
It's not awesome if you're a national league, and not just a national league, not like the NPSL or USL League 2, no disrespect to them, but like the second division in the entire country, and you're on YouTube. Like, that's very bad. It's bad for teams that are looking to draw in more fans, because I know one of the biggest draws that people hate about Detroit City FC is, I don't know how to watch them. They're not on my television. People are like, well, they're on ESPN. It's like, well, it's ESPN Plus. It's not ESPN. Yeah, this is a good way to try to draw people in, maybe get them to tune in to watch them. I know there are going to be some games on ESPN proper this year again, as well as DCFC had last year with El Paso. So hoping that can draw in a few more people as well. This deal, like you said, it's great. It's great for all the teams around because it allows them to stay on ESPN Plus. It allows them to be easily accessible. It allows for an easier way to watch more game than one. You're not having to switch through different YouTube channels or local channels or having to go through word of mouth. You can just go to the app, click here, and go from there.
Yeah, and I actually enjoyed the ESPN Plus experience. I know that's kind of crazy, but I will be subscribing again. I actually kind of think it's a good value for all you get if you're a soccer fan of USL, like I think we are. I will mention, though, that this isn't just about the USL, and this isn't just about MLS, and this isn't just about soccer. You know, as we've talked about on the show before, the sports energy, the oxygen is sucked up all by the NFL. And I think, you know, you see that Bally actually missed their debt payment and is 30 days away or less than 30 days now away from bankruptcy, which is going to impact payments to big teams like the Red Wings and the Tigers. This is an overall realignment of the sports media landscape. And I think the only thing we might see on free TV in a few years is going to be the NFL. Everything else, I think the future is going to be all paid services, which makes somebody like me who watched, you know, the 1980s Tigers on on WDIV very sad. But I think that is the reality.
Yeah, you used to be able to like watch Tigers games, Pistons games, Red Wings games. Just you wake up Saturday morning, Saturday afternoon, Saturday evening, and just go to one of the channel 2 or channel 4 or channel 20, and they just happen to be on. Now it's if you don't have that cable package, you can't watch it. And you might even have the cable package, you might still be blacked out, so you don't get to see it. So it's getting really, really strange and weird about how you're able to access teams for sports for teams that are literally like within 20 miles from you.
All right, enough of the media business stuff and whatever. Let's talk about a friendly that happened. Some notes that we can kind of get from this, because you were kind of keeping your ear to the ground with things. What were some of your thoughts and things from this friendly? Again, preseason, all the caveats, all that other stuff.
Yeah, it's a friendly. You're trying things out. The goal is not necessarily to win. It's more so to just go and try some formations. Obviously, you don't want to get blown out with your starters in the game because that's not good for anybody. It shows that other team starters are better than your starters, even if you are trying things. But Detroit was in Tucson, Arizona for the FC Tucson Desert Showcase, which is a yearly. I think it's the third year they've had it. The first year Detroit City's been invited. Playing against USL Championship rival New Mexico United, losing 3-1. The first goal came by way of New Mexico United's Daniel Bruce. The little clip that New Mexico uploaded shows Maxi Rodriguez get the ball and play a pass to Skage Simonson, who was held, so he lost the ball. The ball then rolls to a player who rolls it to Daniel Bruce, who turns and shoots from midfield. And I'm assuming that Nate was probably pushed up a bit to try to help, get the attack rolling, as it beats him over his head into the net, which is unfortunate. I don't think it's going to happen in an actual game often. I know this is practice, but you don't really want to see that happen. Period. The second goal came. Santi Moore, formerly of Phoenix Rising, was found open in the box, and he slotted a ball home past Nate. DCFC's lone goal came by way of Yazid Matthews, who found some space and was able to let a shot go. He's scored in 2 straight games. That's a good sign to see. You want to see him scoring as much as possible. Unfortunately, this one was not a victory, as Detroit tried to push up late and were countered, and another goal happened to come in. So this doesn't really mean much to me in terms of the result. What it is interesting is in the starting lineup, Cy Goddard, who normally is an attacking midfielder or more of an attacking wing player, was slotted in at wing back. And like I said, this is more of a practice trial type of the time of the year. And I really hope that this trial is over, because I don't want to see Cy Goddard having to defend half the time. Part of the reason why DCFC's wings were really good last year with Reese and Declan Wynn was because they were equally good at attacking as they were at defending. Like, they could do something great attacking wise, send across them. They could also track back and play defense well. Cy Goddard's bread is buttered offensively, not defensively. So having someone there who's more of a defensive liability, especially when your defense is already stretched thin, missing one of your starting center backs, and having a center back next to him and Michael Bryant, who really likes to get forward as much as he can, creates a big gap on that side of the defense. So you really just don't want to see that happen as much as possible. So I really hope this is just them trying something out, and they've seen it and said, you know what? Nope. Junk that back to the drawing board, because if that's the case going forward, it's going to be some rough nights on the wing.
I want to know how fans are feeling. dailydetroit@gmail.com. We'll read some of them on the air. If you don't want us to use your name, well, that's okay. Just say that in the note. But we'd love to have a conversation about your questions as we get closer to the season kickoff. Fletcher Sharpe, thank you so much for spending some time with us on Daily Detroit.
Of course, definitely. I'm always glad to be here and talk about sports in this great city.
Thank you to Julie, Ryan, and John for joining us at patreon.com/dailydetroit. Local information requires local funding, whether it's our members or sponsors, and we thank you both. Tomorrow, Cheyenne Noserini will be joining me for some stories around town, and of course, Fridays with Devin O'Reilly. With that, I'm Jer Stays. Thank you so much for listening. Remember that you are somebody, and I'll see you around Detroit.